This is my two-step guide into making a perfect Crash and Spyro crossover. First, you rip off Pokemon's marketing technique. 2. You rip off Pokemon's trading cards. Here, look, eat the cards. Here. We're marketing the cards. Do the cards make no sense to you? Well, it makes as much sense as how it does in this episode's game. If Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, and Resident Evil 2 just weren't cutting it for you, you'd probably turn to one of these two, Crash and Spyro. Best examples of brothers from other mothers. Both Naughty Dog and Insomniac were bonding with each other throughout the late 90s. However, they lost the rights to their respective franchises, leaving Universal Interactive to decide their fate into third-party mayhem. The Bandicoot and the Dragon were both given to various developers, in which the results were usually half-decent attempts to recapture the brilliance of the original games, or that. I'm a bit mixed on Spyro's track record on the GBA. While I do enjoy that it captures the charm of the original games, the camera is extremely awkward, which can make depth perception a bit cheap at times, but that's mostly just me. Despite that, they're still worth checking out if you're a Spyro fan. Recently, I did play Crash Purple, which is this episode's counterpart, and it's Crash Purple alright. 67 on Metacritic and all. Mostly harmless, but it might bite if provoked. Judging from the reviews, Spyro Orange got a pretty mixed reception, mostly towards the positive end, so maybe this game would be a shrug-off like Crash Purple, or in this case, bite marks. The gameplay is basically collecting gems and going around to various portals in a hub world. Wait, hold up, did I just get ahead of myself?
Because that's how Spyro Orange starts.
The plot this time is that Cortex and Ripto are figuring out how to defeat both Crash and Spyro. Wait, hold on. How do they know each other? Like, they never met before. How do two characters that never had any connection to begin with already know each other? It makes zero sense, and as a result feels incredibly forced and lazy. Now with that out of the way, their master plan is that they will disguise the Riptocs, to be honest they look more like Rhinox in this game, by putting masks on them to look like Crash and Spyro. In this case, they're Crash masks. These have to be the least convincing disguises I've ever seen. Meanwhile, Hunter is staring at the professor like he's watching me sleep, and it's up to Spyro to save the day. Okay, we can... Oh no. These controls are terrible. Spyro's turning is so stiff and his jumps are really uncomfortable, especially with no glide mechanic. Why do they have to make him so uncomfortable to play? Well, he's a dragon and obviously dragons can't turn extremely fast. Sorry, dragon or not, good controls are important, especially for a game that is platform heavy. And in this case, they are not fun to control, which definitely hinders the experience for me right after a ridiculous plot I had to sit through. First impressions are not good, and same can be said for Crash Purple, but at least the controls are actually pretty good in that game. Well, it's just a copy and paste of Crash's moveset in the more traditional GBA games, but that's what Crash Purple needed. This, however, raises many concerns for the game's quality and makes you think, maybe Enter the Dragonfly wasn't so bad after all. The visuals are subpar for the most part, and the music is fine. Well, nothing special, it's just a pretty big letdown for a series celebrated for its music.
They pay me for this.
Can I just go through this review without complaining every 10 seconds? Like, not even 11 seconds. Or 10.5 in that matter. I already mentioned the gameplay, so onto the minigames themselves. Oh wait. Yeah, that's right, this game had minigames, I didn't say that. Starting with this Jeep thing, which shoots in a different angle depending on the power of the shot. This minigame feels uninspired and lacks the Spyro flair, which makes the experience really boring and stock due to the lack of fan service the game has. If Crash Purple can do it, why not this? Also, can this game go any slower? And the slow movement makes jumps feel extremely awkward. Am I playing a video game or watching a snail race? If it's the latter, then good, because at least I don't have to pay for it. The music in this level... sounds like something from a bad Crash Bandicoot soundtrack. Next up, you button mash to open up part of the level. Okay, that exists. The tank minigame, the flying minigame, and the spaceship minigame from the next hub world, just bring it up so I don't have to later on, are
the exact same thing.
The only exceptional difference is that the tank minigame is going 90 degrees to the right.
Whoopie frickin' do.
Once again, these minigames are not Spyro related, which I ask, what is the point? When I think of Spyro, I don't think about the time when I had to fight the sorceress when I had to shoot the damn spaceship to blast the sauce out of her. Not funny, didn't laugh. Even if it is from Year of the Dragon, it's an incredibly vague reference, and they could have been a better minigame to put there, like maybe a Sparks level or something. Okay, the next minigame is pretty much a hybrid between Space Invaders and Breakout, with mechanics of ballistics from Crash Bash. This made sense for Crash Purple since it's part of the Crash Bandicoot series, but it seems that when Vicarious were developing this game, they just gave up and took whatever the marsupial was doing, and they just gave it a song with a lack of percussion. I mean, the song's pretty solid, I love it, but it sounds like it really needs a backbeat to add more tension, especially to a fast-paced minigame. Alright, the final minigame in the hub world, let's do this. You did it! I sure did. Okay, apart from the AI being so exploitable to the point where I can beat this level with my nose, this has to be the most ridiculous minigame of them all. Spyro is throwing Molotovs across the arena. I know that Spyro's fire breath is short range, but then there's a minigame where Spyro can shoot fireballs across the screen.
Where's the consistency in this universe?
Now that I brought that up, it seems that Vicarious, coming off making several Crash games, pretty much had no freaking clue what to do with the Spyro game, so they just winged it and hoped that they knew that they were doing something good. Crash Purple wasn't great, but at least some of the minigames are actually inspired from previous entries. If the best thing you got to reference is a pretty forgettable vehicle that only appeared once, then I don't know what to say. On to the next hub world, and I already mentioned the spaceship minigame, so I don't want to sound like a broken record, so let's move on to the next one. Look at this. In fact, don't. This minigame is too horrible for the naked eye. Spyro rides the world's slowest mech while jumping from floor to the ceiling so that he can get to the end. There are tons of enemies and hazards to avoid and shoot, which rely on a finite ammo system where you hold one rocket per shot, meaning that if you miss the rocket power-up, you just have to take the hit, which can lead to this game being pretty frustrating. This game is pissing me off. I didn't even lift the toilet seat up. Alright, last minigame. Let's see what this one's about. Don't have too many hopes for this one. Oh, it's another button mashing minigame. Well, that exists. Of the 9 minigames, 6 of them are their own thing. Okay, the breakout one is ripped from Crash Purple, so that makes it 5. Nearly half the games are just reskins of previous minigames. And not to mention, the minigames repeat usually adding something different for more of a challenge. But it's a shame some of these minigames play identical to each other, which can make the levels extremely forgettable, especially when the similar minigames are in the same hub world. Okay, now the bosses. First up is Crash. Judging from this game's counterpart, it's probably, well, I knew it. In this case, Spyro wins and all of a sudden they instantly become best friends or something, despite there being no character development between the two. Double trouble with Crush and Gulp being the next boss. Hey, at least it's better than the tiny boss fight from Crash's game. This boss is pretty decent. Almost good if it wasn't for the crappy controls, and the fact that it's on ice doesn't make it much easier to avoid Crush. And also, Gulp will never shoot you if you just stay in the middle. Alright then. Like Crash Purple, we get to fight Nina, who would later appear in the rest of the mainline Crash Bandicoot series, as well as the main villain in Crash of the Titans. All I can say is, wow, what a debut. So this fight takes place before the fight in Crash Purple, where Spyro has to save Coco and the Professor by bumping Nina into the cages. Kinda boring and a pretty anticlimactic ending to it. After a pretty cool hub world where you explore Crash's world, we fight Cortex. Oh yeah, they reused the same sprite of Spyro from the Crash boss fight. And it's this minigame! Well, it's kinda self-explanatory at this point, so let's just move on. So you end up to this place where you cannot enter this portal. The professor told me to go back and beat each minigame 2 more times. No wonder how that one got in there. The game throws an insane difficulty spike at you, where I have to play the same freaking minigames over and over until I win. And usually the game gets so difficult to the point where some of these took me over an hour to beat. Particularly the mech and the pinball ones. And all you get is a boss with an incredibly choppy frame rate, which is so easy that the 67 time limit doesn't even matter, and Crash and Spyro save the world, and that's it.
Done.
You realize they had quality assurance for this game. Let's just assume that they made a typo and it should have been called
Quantity assurance.
Let's be honest, that's just like half the Spyro series in a nutshell. After that, you've pretty much experienced what I consider one of the worst games I ever played. A ridiculous story, crappy controls, mediocre boss fights, mini-games that not only have nothing to do with the source material, but range from redundant at best to unbearable at worst, and now I'm banging the table for no reason! The game at its best are the visuals and the music. But even then, they're overshadowed by the game's flaws, and Spyro's more isometric games, while I do think they're flawed, they're at least enjoyable, and are much better games than this abomination of mankind. Or dragonkind, if you will. This game gets nothing, you idiot. This game deserves the same respect as my rock collection. Oh look, nothing! Although I'm not a fan of Crash Purple, I think I should consider myself lucky that this is the game I own, since at least I do find it enjoyable, and it's much more faithful to the source material, in which I can't say the same thing for Spyro Orange. But even then, there really isn't much of a reason to play Crash Purple, unless you're a die-hard fan who wants to play every game in the series. There's a lot of cards here. Come on. As for Spyro, unless you're a Hero's Tale fan, there is no doubt that Spyro continued to fall a downward spiral, that is the Spyro franchise after the PS1 trilogy. Until the Skylanders games came out, and everyone loved him again, mostly due to the scummy marketing campaign of Activision. Now that I think about it, that only makes the fate of Spyro worse. Until the Reignite trilogy. Thank you for around 75 subscribers. I appreciate it, and sorry this video took a long time to make. And next episode we'll be doing a Christmas one, so see you in December.